The comments and views expressed on The Moore Show are those of the people that make them and do not necessarily reflect the view of Kevin Moore, The Moore Show, or this radio station and its affiliate or sponsors. This show is for entertainment purposes only.
Broadcasting from the UK and across the world online. You're now watching The Moore Show and I'm your host, Kevin Moore. Now for this next hour, I'll be covering subjects that will open up your mind and provide you with information you may have never heard before. Now on today's show, I'm about to be joined with my guest, Dr. Eben Alexander. Now, Dr. Alexander is a renowned academic neurosurgeon who has spent the past 54 years honouring his scientific worldview. Now, he thought he knew how the brain and mind worked until he's experienced a transcendental near-death experience in which he was driven to the brink of death and spent a week in a deep coma from a brain infection. Now, he was shocked to find the hyperreality of the spiritual realm, which many have reported in near-death experiences. He spent the next 8.5 years reconciling the rich spiritual experience with contemporary physics and cosmology. Now, his spiritual experience is totally consistent with the leading edge of scientific understanding today. Well, Dr. Eben Alexander, welcome to the show.
Well, great to be here, Kevin. Thanks for having me.
I'm so honoured to have you on the show. I really am. To me, well, you're someone that's been on their journey. You've helped so many people with sharing your truth as well, and I think that's just so important. For me, you come from love in the sense of a need to share that unconditional love is the answer.
Right. It has infinite power to heal, and that is really right at the center of the message that we try and bring to the world in all of our presentations and books and everything else. And I don't think many people would doubt that if they really just try it out and kind of feel where it takes them. And whatever difficult problems and darknesses we face in our lives, they can be made much brighter and more kind of comfortable in many ways when we take that broader view and learn to go within and come to see the power of that infinite love and how it can bring such healing into our lives.
Absolutely. There's so much I want to go through, and I know we've got to go. I know you've done so many interviews, and I know you probably enjoy every single one. But we do have to go just over some of the basics as well. I mean, maybe before we do, I mean, the person that you are now, how different are you in the way that you approach problems in your life, in the way that you are to other people, in the way that you are to yourself, in a sense as well?
Well, basically, I would say about 180 degrees opposite to what I was before. And a lot of that has to do with opening up a worldview and seeing the possibilities of reality and of existence that are so much greater and more kind of miraculous and astonishing and purposeful and meaningful than anything that I perceived before my coma. And I think that is what is such a gift about this, is as opposed to that kind of scientific materialist mindset that I had harbored before that can be very bleak and daunting as we human beings are painted as smaller and smaller insignificant specks in the universe. This emerging worldview is one that is tremendously empowering for us individuals and for all of humanity, all of life on Earth, by realizing that we are far more than that the little thing that harbors thoughts and thinks it lives birth to death and nothing more and exists in this little physical body. We are far more than that. And realizing that and the purpose that we're all here for, which is really, from my point of view, to share that beautiful oneness and that infinite healing power of unconditional love for self and others. And it really changes everything. As a doctor, as a healer, as someone who is aware of modern physics, cosmology, and the role of quantum mechanics and trying to figure all this out, it really is a very liberating and refreshing place where I have arrived compared to what I was harboring before my coma, believing fully in that scientific materialism and that the physical world is all that exists, which I now know to be absolutely not the case.
Well, thank you for, what you just had to share there. I mean, going through the experience you went through, do you feel that you're much more happier in your life right now, that you're living your purpose, that your issues that you had, deep buried issues that you never spoke to anyone before prior to the near-death experience, that now maybe you're able to go into and heal some aspects of yourself that you wasn't able to do before?
Well, I think that's the case whenever we are able to go within or to thin that veil and come more in touch with our higher soul, more in touch with that universal mind. My near-death experience definitely did that, opened me up, basically cracked me wide open to a point where I had to question everything I had come to believe about the nature of reality and existence and start over from square one. And I think that's one of the most beautiful gifts that comes from any such epiphany or experience, life-changing experience like this. And the good news is, and this is why Karen Newell, my life partner, and I love going around giving workshops, is that meditation, going within, and especially sound-enhanced meditation using the sacred acoustics kind of approach that we often present in our workshops, is a very powerful tool that can allow any conscious being to really get to the same place in terms of connecting with our higher soul, which of course is something that we very routinely do in near-death experiences and other similar experiences. But the fact that it can be cultivated through a practice of meditation, I think, is the greatest news for all the rest of us out there. You don't have to sit around and wait for an NDE, wait to get smote down by some horrific illness or injury. You can cultivate it by, a frequent practice, a daily practice of going within. We can come to know that much grander mind and reunite with our higher soul. And really, as Einstein pointed out in a beautiful quote, he said that really the value of a human being in our society is directly proportional to the degree to which they've liberated themselves from the sense of self. The boundaries of self. This is really a lot of what we're talking about here. Because as neuroscientists and philosophers of mind advance on fronts trying to understand the very nature of consciousness and the relationship between brain and mind, what we find is that they're opening up an entirely different worldview, which is what was opened up to me by my coma. And that expansion in worldview is very much about taking the ego and the kind of thoughts in our little daily existence as this being that believes it lives birth to death and nothing more, and reconnecting us to that permanent, eternal part of us, to our higher soul. And again, that happens very routinely in near-death and shared-death experiences, other spontaneous transformative experience, spiritually transformative experiences. But the fact that we can do it through meditation, and what I recommend to people who have trouble meditating, is using something like sacred acoustics as a auditory tool to help them get very deep, very efficiently. And it's really all about how we come to reconnect with our higher souls. And I would argue that that is how we can best manifest true free will, because free will is very much a question mark, especially when you talk about the ego and talk about kind of our programmed behavior that we often manifest as human beings living here in this four-dimensional space-time. And this is really about manifesting that higher free will that gets in touch with the purpose for our very life and for our very existence with other members of our soul group. And that reuniting with a higher soul also opens that door to the much grander existence that, in fact, we can start to envision other lifetimes that we have lived and see how they fit into this beautiful pattern of the growth of our soul group. And I think it's this kind of refreshing, much larger field of view that I have for my own existence and my own purpose and meaning for being here, that I think is such a gift. And we can all come to nurture that connection with higher soul, with soul groups, with that infinite loving force at the core of the universe, the creative source of pure love at the core of all that is. And we are part of that. In fact, even the word part is misleading because in truth, there is no separation. We are all one with the universe. Our mind and the universe are one hologram. And this is such a huge part of the awakening that has come to me, is realizing how consciousness is fundamental in the universe and really growing with that and seeing that there is always a win-win situation that involves manifesting that love of the creator for the creation, as I often put it, and letting that flow through us so that we live our lives manifesting that love for ourselves. Because I came back from my coma journey realizing that first and foremost, most of the problems on earth are caused because we don't even love ourselves enough. And we think the problem is loving our neighbor, loving the enemy. Well, start with loving yourself and you will have already solved most of the problems in this world. And this is where, and we can best manifest that love by expressing that love for others. And that, part of the loving others is realizing that we are all one. We're part of one mind. And that is the emerging reality coming out of consciousness studies and some of the deepest thinkers on the mind-body question, on the philosophers of mind and neuroscientists who are interested in consciousness, are all converging to the same kind of territory here.
I just knew there would not be enough time in this interview. What you've got to share and your knowledge is so in depth. And of course, your books are coming up on the screen as we speak right now, and people can go a lot deeper when they purchase the books as well. Okay, so it's all about love in a sense. How much? If I said to myself today, how much have I loved today? In what part of any aspect of what I've done today did I come from love? And I would find that most parts of today I maybe wasn't that loving to myself, not that loving to other people, but there would have been some part of today that was very loving. And that seems to be the key here, that to me. But what is not love, in a sense? And not everyone comes from. Some people will say, well, you know what, tough love is a good thing, Kevin, sometimes. But for me, that's not my truth. I think for my truth would have to be, love does not hurt. Love does not cause pain. Love is not nasty to someone else. But then someone else's definition of love would be opposite to that, wouldn't it? And who is right, who is wrong? It's almost like, well, my channeling tells me, it's almost like, we are all here to with our own truth, and that truth is being redefined in every moment, every instant.
Well, I think that's a very good point. You can imagine, and certainly people who have heard me speak at multiple occasions over several years, because I first started giving talks about my experience 2.5 years before the book Proof of Heaven came out. So I've now given more than 350 talks. Karen and I often do presentations, to help people get into deep meditative states using sacred acoustics tones. And what I can tell you is that in the early stages, in the first year or two after my experience, as much as I knew it was showing me something radically different about the worldview that I needed to accept, I kept defaulting back to my prior materialist neuroscientist training, trying to explain all this somehow as a hallucination. Then when I realized, no, that the evidence was far too strong of a real event. Of course, that's something I touch on in Proof of Heaven and often touch on in my talks. But then realizing the power of that love, because the journey itself, my NDE, was just, an explosion of knowing the power of that love to heal in all settings, across eternity and infinity. That love has so much power. But I kept thinking of it, especially as my overall conceptualizations about consciousness evolved, and I came more to a position of realizing consciousness is fundamental in the universe, and creating all that we see in this physical world emerges out of consciousness. It's really the best way to look at all this. And in all that, knowing the power and importance of that love, I kept thinking that this is about love and consciousness, and I was, brain-mind consciousness. And thank God in November of 2011, I encountered my life partner, Karen Newell, and she's been tremendously important. She's been on a lifelong spiritual journey, so she has a tremendous head start on me, is very smart. I don't think she ever forgets the thing that she's read. And she was the one, though, that really helped me to open up to heart consciousness, really helped me to get out of my head. I was so in my head thinking, brain, mind, consciousness is the neurosurgeon trying to explain all this. And she made it very clear that the heart, of course, was the origin, and feeling. It makes a difference in how you approach to feel that heart consciousness and feel that love for self and others, and really live it through a heart vibration. And the other thing that she helped me with, and this was a tremendous aid, was I was trying to kind of do love as a verb, love myself and love others, and looking at that love as an action that I would take. And Karen had me shift my mindset in a very important and crucial way that I would highly recommend, and people who are especially into meditation can use this to great purpose, is to start becoming that love, to be the love. And it's a different vibration than this notion of being kind of a passive entity, or some kind of a cognitive awareness center that is doing an action of loving itself or loving others, where it became much cleaner, especially in deep meditation, to simply be the love. And that helped me to unite that higher soul that is eternally in a realm of pure love and oneness and forgiveness and compassion, and let that just flow through me and be my being, so that in fact I become the love here. And becoming that love is becoming that bridge of love that brings it in from the pure source, from the origin of the entire universe, brings that healing energy. And healing, remember, and health all come from the same word for wholeness, being complete. And this is all about recognizing, when we often say all is well, all is well. It already is. It's not like we have to get to something else to be well. Recognizing the all is well involves that reconnection with our higher soul, where we can see all the possibilities of our action and realize that we're all in this together. And it's always about a win-win solution. And when we're connected with our higher soul, and when we know in our heart and have the power of that beautiful, infinite healing power of love, and we simply are that and serve, as that bridge that basically connects the spiritual and the love with this world, it has a tremendous shift. It allows a tremendous shift in our ability to manifest that love in our own health and the health of others, and in the well-being of all with whom we interact.
So true. so powerful what you're saying right now. It really is very, very, I'm connecting with you now. Okay, you so much you talked about there as well, and previously. You talk about the ego, you talk about the noise in the head. Now, obviously, I've never had Eckhart Tolle on, but I've had others that have had the same experience and are going on to teach the sort of Eckhart Tolle teachings, in the sense of this ability to quiet the noise in the mind, to listen to the soul in a sense, but really just to have a happier state of being by having less noise, not living in the past, living in the future, but living in the present moment now. But the one thing that I've come up against that is that when that noise is there, is it trying to tell me something? Is the ignorance of that noise as a warning bell trying to tell you something the right way? I'm not saying the teachings of Eckhart Tolle or others are wrong. I'm saying, is there another way of looking at it, that actually when that noise is there, to listen to it, to process it, to go with it, and to see if it's true or not? Does it come from fear, or does it come from love?
That's a beautiful point. I for one, feel that Eckhart Tolle is very, very tightly connected with the center of this kind of knowing and understanding, this beautiful way that he presents of living in the now. A huge part of our understanding of this will involve our very notions of time flow and causality, and past, present, and future are not at all as kind of clear-cut as they seem to be to us in this middle realm. And that's a huge part of it. But a big part of the energy of that is realizing that power of now, as Eckhart Tolle so beautifully points out. Now, getting back to your question, the voice in our head, the little thoughts going on in my mind. First of all, I'm sure that most of your listeners probably already realize that, of course, that little voice is not consciousness. Do not even begin to give it that much power in your mind. Consciousness, the deep mystery of consciousness, whether you're talking about what is known as the hard problem of consciousness, which is one of the deepest mysteries known to modern science and philosophy, or the measurement paradox in quantum physics, because it's a kind of a parallel version of the same thing, pointing out the primary role of conscious awareness in this universe. It's really that awareness. It's the observer. And so my advice to the listeners who are paying attention to that little voice and kind of getting at your question about that voice is to realize that the little voice in our head, that is the voice of logic and reason, our thoughts, and all that, that's tightly attached to our ego and to these ideas of self. But it is really not who we are at all. And if you're interested in exploring this mystery of consciousness, what that involves is going into quiet, environments like in meditation. And as I said earlier, for those who have a very active chatterbox in their brain, I would especially recommend the audio brain entrainment of Sacred Acoustics. You can go to sacredacoustics.com to download their free files, look at some teaching videos there, and get started with your own program of awakening and awareness. But a huge part of the program, and this is something that Karen Newell and I often talk about in our workshops, is recognizing that little voice in the head, the voice of the ego, which also happens to be the voice of our logical, rational thinking, scientific, philosophical minds and all. And of course, that's how we communicate with other human beings. But within consciousness, we don't have to rely on language at all. In fact, it's a major impediment. Anyone who has been there, as NDEs routinely tell you, and this applies to all other spiritually transformative experiences as well, is a lot of that territory, it's not Disneyland. So it's not like our earthly language, which is very well suited for earthly kinds of encounters. It's why our earthly language really doesn't work as well to describe that. And again, it's a reason why we encourage people to go within, because all of us have access to the same territory. But you're not going to think your way there. You're not going to use your little logical brain, your linguistic brain, to follow a line of reasoning to get there. In fact, in many ways, this kind of spiritual journey follows completely opposite rules to what we often apply in our lives here in four-dimensional space-time. For example, I remember I opened the book Proof of Heaven in talking about the dreams I used to have as a child of flying. And I would start to float up into the sky and go higher and faster. But as soon as I started to embrace it, like, oh, this is amazing, wham, I'd smash into the ground. And so it was that strange paradox in the dreams of having to let go and not enjoy it, not embrace it, that allowed me to really go higher and faster and farther. And likewise, very much it's the case with meditation. It's very much a process of letting go. And a big part of that letting go is setting that little voice, the little voice of reason and anxiety, the voice of the ego, like, am I doing this right? What am I doing wrong? All that kind of nuisance chatter coming from that little voice in the head is what we can gently put into timeout. Because the mystery of consciousness to the scientific community is that awareness. It's the observer, and that observer actually has access to far greater wisdom when left traversing the veil and getting into access with that higher soul and with that infinite consciousness. And that is so much a part of this, is realizing that we can come to witness deep truth, but a lot of it is by letting go of the connections, the concerns, the anxieties, and the fears that our ego plops all around us in this life, because the ego wants that attention. But remember, your ego is not your friend in this journey. As many of my friends in addiction medicine will point out, often the ego would much rather see itself survive than to see the body of the host of that ego survive. And that's why often a bottom in addiction or alcoholism is so low that the patient dies before they're able to satisfy the ego. And often a ritual kind of ego death through psychodrama is used as a treatment in that kind of environment. But the point I'm making here is this is really about more getting in touch with a higher self. And part of that is recognizing the little linguistic voice in our head, the voice of the ego, is not our ally in this. And we often have to set it aside, put it into timeout very gently. When I do meditation, which I would say is for me a form of centering prayer that goes right to the one mind and right to the healing power of infinite healing power of unconditional love, I let the little linguistic voice in my head make an intention. Might even be a one-word intention or 3 words, something very short and sweet and to the, but it can leave it wide open. And then I want to see what the meditation will bring back to me. And it comes from that recognition of that higher soul connection.
Well, that's it, isn't it? The meditation, I said to you just before this interview that all answers lie within, and, we actually don't need to see a medium or a psychic or anything. Even though I'm launching a psychic network this year, my difference with this network, right, is I don't want addictions on there. I want when someone comes for a reading, we're not going to, support any addictions on there, or try not to. You are the answer. You are the answer you was always looking for within. Now, okay, some people are not able to meditate. Well, not everyone's able to meditate, but able to really trust themselves in the first process of listening to that inner voice. That's okay. But those that are, or those that want to try it, that voice will never let you down. That loving information that comes through meditation, whatever you're going to ask, in your head, trust it. It wants the best for you. Always.
Very good point. That trust is so crucial. And of course, as I point out in Proof of Heaven, that was a beautiful gift for me on my journey, was that trust. And that is what we can develop. And I think you're making a beautiful point there. It's so important to start with an attitude, a belief that we can trust, that we will be taken care of. And I promise you, going into that space, into that meditation space or NDE, going across the veil into that realm of pure mind and of pure oneness, we can trust. And you can, by believing that and putting your faith in that and setting it out there and then trying it, you find that it comes back to you many times over, that trust is warranted.
So true. The word I was looking for there is I don't want to be my network to be an enabler. I want it to be something much. I want you to be enabling yourself, not the other way around.
And enabling your kind of higher purpose and your higher soul. And that's always one that involves win-win scenarios in the dealings of your life. This is not about, that old kind of outmoded and improper interpretation of Darwinian survival and survival of the fittest. That was a huge problem in our 20th century thinking, that's what, biological evolution was all about. It's much more about collaboration and cooperation between members of a species and also between species. So we're learning.
That's actually very true. But one thing that's really struck me in my journey since 2008 of doing this show, when I went to university to start this show off, was how much past lives have an effect on us. How we have these deep, secretive patterns within that we don't tell anyone, or we maybe only told some people that we trust, or we don't even understand maybe to even tell anyone that they're there because we don't, they can't comprehend where they're coming from. Yet there is enabler patterns in us as well from past lives. Maybe these past lives are happening simultaneously right now, past, present, future, it's all happening right now. But through meditation, maybe we're able to even go into a part, to ask ourselves, what past life is affecting my current issues right now, and to go in there and heal those issues, because we've all got issues. I can assure you of that. And have you? And I guess this goes back to yourself as well. Has this near-death experience enabled you to heal some of your issues?
It has, very much, and believe me, I am still deeply involved in some of them. So it's not as if I'm 8 years out from my NDE, and I feel like I'm still on an almost vertical part of the learning curve. but a lot of it in terms of my own personal growth and dealing with the issues that I came into this incarnation to deal with, I am making tremendous progress with. And of course, I don't really have time to go into details on that. Some of it is deeply personal. But the reality is, yes, this kind, I would say that the 54 years before my coma, I probably made about 3 or 4% of the progress compared to what I've made since then, which is many times over more. But it has to do with that really getting down to that fundamental relationship of self with universe and realizing that we're all here in our soul groups to live and learn with each other. I like to say often that it's very much the case, as Teilhard de Chardin pointed out in the mid-20th century, that all of consciousness throughout the universe is evolving. It is all going through this process of learning. And that happens through the learning and teaching of individual sentient beings. And we all contribute as members of that one mind to that beautiful and tremendous process of the evolution of consciousness and knowledge and information itself. That, in fact, from my point of view, is why this whole universe is expanding. That's where that energy is coming from, is that increase in information, which I think is a beautiful way of tying it all together with the purpose of this universe and really the purpose of the individual living their lives and contributing in that effort.
Thank you so much for that, by the way. My channeling always told me that us humans always do it the most difficult way. Yet, on the other hand, I think to myself, well, hang on a minute, would me as a soul, before I incarnated here, want a world where it's just full of love, happiness, peace, and everything else? Don't I want these opposites in this world to exist so I can have the experience that it offers me? We talk about where we want consciousness to, where we'd like to see the world head to. What does the souls incarnating here really want? Do you think that we maybe do it the most difficult way, or do you think there's a kind of happiness that it is the way that it is, as crazy as it is, because that's the only way for the experience to happen?
Well, I think that's an excellent question, because as much as on my NDE, especially in the core realm and that infinite oneness, which is so impossible to put into any kind of words, what it seemed from that vantage point was that there were billions of civilizations throughout the cosmos, all evolving and having different lessons at these various civilizations at various points. But what I saw was, over the many thousands of years of interest of which I could focus for humanity on Earth in this particular epoch in which we live, it was clear that the way we would interpret the message to be learned, and the message, in many ways, its presentation shifts with the kind of degree of advance in these civilizations and in these sentient beings. But at our current level in this particular epoch, it was really to learn those lessons of love of the Creator for the creation, that it's all about coming to see that we are all one and coming to know that oneness of consciousness, and that it's not just humans. This is about, and it's not limited by just all life forms on Earth. It's much bigger than that. And humans, we have a way of kind of putting ourselves up on some little pedestal as if we're, the most advanced information processing system in the known universe. Well, that gets us in a lot of trouble. And to think that we have any fundamental difference from other beings, especially if you look across the broad spectrum that we see here on Earth, but also what many journeyers have seen in terms of advanced civilizations throughout this universe, it's very important to get the bigger perspective and not keep defaulting to some human point of view that, again, tends to put us up on a pedestal. I would have argued before my coma that the thing that makes human beings so magical and special is our language, our ability to communicate. Well, animals actually have pretty sophisticated means of communication, which they do very readily. I mean, anybody who watches a school of fish or a flock of birds flying in the sky, you can't doubt they have pretty advanced communication skills that guide them as a unit. So don't think that we have that. In fact, since my coma, I've come to the point where I realize that the thing that makes us special when you compare humans to other animals is not that language factor, which in fact gets in the way of a lot of our spiritual awareness compared to what I think animals have. But the thing that makes us different is we cook. That's about it. So that's our big claim to fame. So everybody go enjoy that one and have a good dinner tonight. But it's not our language. If anything, our language tends to, in some ways, kind of separate us from that oneness, giving us this notion of separation. And again, that's a huge part of this awakening, is realizing we're all part of one mind.
I mean, that's mind-blowing there, the amount of civilizations you mentioned there, billions. Well, like, when you consider, well, my mind can't consider an infinite universe. I really can't get that in my head. So, billions, yes, that's possible. That's just beautiful that you got to see that potential of what's beyond our current understanding right now, or beyond mankind's current understanding of what's out there. Coming back to here now on this planet as well, would you say generally you're a happy person? I mean, are there times when even with all this wonderful, beautiful teaching that you've got, that you do feel a bit down, and nothing that you've gone through is enough to sometimes get you back up, except just to keep going on?
Well, as I said earlier, I'm still dealing with some of those kind of personal issues that were around my whole life story. Of adoption and of then a reunion with a birth family. But a lot of that is still very much in flux. And I would say in general, I would consider myself a very happy person, since my coma at least. And a lot of that I would stress, because I think if you ask me what is the most essential factor that has allowed that kind of happiness, I would say that is clear. Gratitude. Gratitude is, from my point of view, and there's a quote from Cicero at the end of Proof of Heaven where I'll paraphrase here, but it's something like, gratitude is not only the greatest of virtues, but also the parent of all other virtues. And I would say that gratitude is absolutely essential. I sometimes talk about the gratitude to resentment ratio, and the higher I can keep that ratio, the better. Resentments are not our friend. Also, in the same kind of setting of gratitude, I would point out what an extremely powerful tool forgiveness is. Forgiveness, the greatest gift of all, goes to the forgiver. And forgiveness is a tool that is far too underused in our society, has been for thousands of years. You look at certain conflicts around the world that have perpetuated for millennia between various groups, where if only they would get this message of forgiveness, they could move beyond it like that in a day. And yet you face hundreds or thousands of years of conflict between various warring factions or religious factions, where forgiveness itself is the simple and easy key. And yet, for some reason, they seem to have trouble with that. But I would say gratitude and forgiveness are two things to always remember if you think you're kind of at wit's end and have run out of tools to make your life better.
Thank you so much for that. Well, I was just thinking as you were saying that you're my gratitude for today, most definitely, to be in your space. I wouldn't care if I just got one or two views in this interview right now, just to be in your presence and hear your truth. That's humbling, and I'm very grateful and gratitude for that as well, most definitely.
Thank
you. You've got some magnificent truths, beautiful stuff, and this is just your truth, and we all have to come up with our own truth. That truth will always be different in some respect, right? And that's okay, because I think when we cross back over and go home to the place that you went to, where we come from, when we go back to, there is no over-defining truth. There's no book that's going to be slammed down and said, okay guys, got it wrong, but here's the actual truth you were looking for. No, I think there's infinitive levels to go to with each of their own truths. I believe that those levels are channeling each other and bringing truths down to help in the moment now for the level's truth to increase. And so there's no defining truth. But as much as the beautiful stuff that you're saying, religion will say, well, it has to be this way or that way, otherwise, there's a punishment or there's sinfulness. But then when you consider religion and you consider the resurrection of Christ and the ascension, that's never happened ever. We've never experienced that truth. No one's ever seen that happen to mankind since the so-called story. So as much as they say it's maybe sinful or crazy for the story that you're sharing now, it's just as crazy for the story that they share, where it's never been proven that that happened in the first place. So, I do think about that sometimes. I hope you can answer that question, maybe, if that is a question.
Yeah, well, to me, the resurrection, I had grown up in a Methodist church and then spent a lot of my adult life in a Episcopal church, although as I talk about in Proof of Heaven, I'd become very agnostic, especially over the 8 years before my coma. And then, of course, my coma journey made me forever realize that God is absolutely real at the core of our consciousness. But it also, my journey showed me very clearly that God, that infinite power of love at the core of the universe, that God loves Christians, Jews, Muslims, Hindus, Buddhists, skeptics, atheists. That God loves all. It's a universal God that loves all of life. All of this existence is incorporated in that beautiful love. And that is, a very crucial concept to get across. I would say, in fact, that the whole question of the resurrection of Christ, from my point of view, I think what near-death experiences are bringing back to this world is a very kind of fundamental spirituality that is purely about love and God and all of us being in this together and one mind. This is really kind of the religion, if you want to call it that would emerge from consolidating the message from near-death experiences. It's very much one that is completely in line with original Christianity, including reincarnation. That's a very important point. In fact, as Dr. Herbert Puryear points out in his beautiful book, Why Jesus Taught Reincarnation, the interpretation, the orthodox interpretation of the resurrection and how that was presented to all of us, and then this notion that Christ died for our sins, and that all we have to do is confess a belief in Jesus Christ, and that gives us an automatic ticket to heaven. Some people believing that if we don't profess that allegiance to Christ, that we don't get in there. That's all very misleading thinking. And in fact, I would say even the biblical report of the resurrection is one that really would cause one to question whether it was a physical body resurrection. And the reason I say that is even in the book of John, which is very much a direct rebuttal to the book of Thomas. If you read the book of Thomas, you get a completely different view, and one that I think completely opens the door to all these lessons of eternal soul and of multiple incarnations and all. It's really a whole different way of viewing it that I think is very important. For example, in the book of John, they talk about Christ appearing, a week after in a house with locked doors and windows. And that was clearly making the point that he didn't appear there as a physical body coming through a door or window. He appeared there as his light body. And I would say that Christ was here to demonstrate we are all Christ-like. As is said somewhere in the Bible, these and many even greater things you will do. Christ saying to another human being. And I think that was really the deeper message from Christ, is we are all Christ-like. We are all children of God. We are all directly connected to God in that Christ-like fashion. What he was trying to teach us is to bring the love in our lives. That unconditional love had infinite power to heal. And so I would say that so much of my current view of religion and of God is very consistent with original Christianity. It's also consistent with the teachings of Buddha, teachings of Muhammad. Yep. I mean, this is all universal. I would say the messages of the prophets, in many ways, are lined up to teach us to lead a life of compassion, of forgiveness, and of love. First and foremost, love for ourselves, love for others. These are the important lessons that we still obviously have not learned very well. And to try and pin it up as, Christians versus Muslims versus Jews or something like that, obviously involves the dysfunctional overlay of human beings trying to control other human beings. Right. And that's where I think the problem is with our modern situation with religions. As far as I'm concerned, religions are fine as long as they stick to the script of the original prophetic message, which is love, compassion, forgiveness, acceptance, and mercy. And that's all we're really here to do now, is to follow those lessons. And to the extent that any modern religious faith is trying to foment separation, better than, we're better than they are, etc., that's a very misleading and very much contrarian to the original messages of the prophets, which were really about love and oneness and mercy. And that's what we need to bring back to this world. And to me, it's just an absolute shock that anyone could ever be fooled into believing that a creative deity, a deity that could create such a beauty as the creation of this universe, would be a jealous little petty being that would threaten you for not praying. I mean, that's all dysfunctional human thinking. That's not the kind of thing that comes out of a creator of all that is.
No, you're so
and
right.
So this is really about expanding our view of that love and oneness and that deity and that source, which is the origin of our very conscious awareness.
I'm so with you on all of that. I really am. If I could do one thing before I left this world in the future, that would be, even on my talk show, to bring different religious factors together and see the love and to see the cooperation and the connection between all of them, and that they all share the same common theme. Most definitely. I think some human beings, unfortunately, want to be told what to do, told what to think, told what to say, because taking self-responsibility is a difficult thing sometimes. And it's okay, sometimes it protects life after life and many more, for some people to get to that point. And there's no judgment, is there? Nothing's judging you. The only person that judges yourself is you, probably.
Right. Well, it's with that higher soul and with the soul group. It's really a kind of approaching more of that one mind. And it's that awareness and that learning and teaching that occurs in that life review that I think is so important. Another important thing to point out about the life review, and of course, life review is not some new age concept. Life review has been around for thousands of years. I mean, you can see it in Plato's account of Armenian soldier one of the earliest NDEs reported, at least in the Western literature. And that Armenian soldier saw very clearly that when you die, you go through a review of all the most pertinent features of your life, and you relive them as from the point of view of others. It's not, witnessing it from the point of view of self and self's boundaries. You actually become the others around you, to feel the impact of your actions and thoughts on others. And that is what serves in the brilliant light of love in which that life review occurs, with that infinite healing power of love, of the oneness of that deity. That's the setting that gives any kind of judgment. And you're right, the judgment actually comes from that kind of conglomeration of higher soul and soul group in planning the next incarnation. So it's not from that infinite power of love that the judgment is made. Now, and this also brings up that point of what happens in hellish NDEs, or
good point.
The ones that are challenging and difficult.
And I'll just say this is what I've challenged people on the hellish near-death experiences. Howard Storm, and a few others, and it's in So I'd love to hear what you've got to say on that.
Yeah, well, the important thing to point out, and I not only get to read many NDEs in the literature, I also, by giving these talks, as I said, 350 talks I've given on these topics since 2010. So I get lots of audience members come up and share their own experiences with me. I get plenty of that. But it is really a tremendous lesson in how that life review works, and how that love really works, and seeing that our journeys then have so much more purpose here in living these lives. And it's very important in looking at that whole past life and between lives, the life review. Every bit of that is a system that is real. It's how this universe works. And this continuity of soul, continuity of spirit, and of consciousness and awareness and of growing information, that is all something that is emerging from that whole worldview. Now, getting back to your question about the hellish NDEs, my point would be that I get to talk to a lot of people who have had all kinds of NDEs, including many that are, quote, described as hellish. And the thing that strikes me is so kind of interesting is the hellish NDEs are just like the others. I mean, for example, If I had just gone to the earthworm's eye view that I described of heaven and then come back to this world, I would have had a hellish NDE. I think in general the hellish NDEs, if anything, are just, quote, incomplete. But even many of the hellish NDEs you read, what you realize is what happened is somebody had a tough life review because they had been leading a life of greed, of inflicting pain on others, suffering on others, just not leading a very loving life, and their life review is horrible. And yes, they describe it as very hellish. And then they come back as seeing it as a very positive influence. Because when they come back to this world, they realize that that prior mode of living that gave them a hellish life review, their life of greed and kind of careless, loveless dealings with other people, was the wrong way to be. So they come back with a very positive change, even though they describe, it was hellish, it was rough. Well, yeah, because the life they'd been leading before was way off track. And so I would say that hellish NDEs really just kind of bring up the example of NDEs in general, because the hellish ones are very positive and affirming, and also, as people will tell you, the memories from these events are not like memories of anything else. These memories are very resilient, they're very stable. Bruce Grayson has done work at UVA on the stability of NDE memories. They last for decades, basically unchanged. Yeah. I know that people come up to me after some of my talks and they'll share an NDE. They often come up and say, I've never told anybody this before, but. And then some of them will share a story that might have occurred 50 or 60 years ago of a very powerful, profound NDE way back before anybody even used the term NDE, and yet they share a story with me that fits right in the mold and shares the same beautiful message. And even if they might describe some hellish features, with that extreme memory and life-changing quality of the events, remembering it, many decades later, to me says volumes about how important all this is and how real it is. This is the stage in which this universe, we live in a spiritual universe where spiritual beings, all of the matter of it, the physical matter, is simply the stage setting. That is all set up in a beautiful and amazing way, and yet the thing that is absolutely real is the awareness, is the consciousness that lives. And that consciousness is what generates all of this emerging reality. It's a complete opposite view from what I had before my coma, thinking the brain created consciousness. It works the other way around completely. And all of modern neuroscience and philosophy of mind is headed in this direction, because the physicalist position that the brain creates consciousness has never gone anywhere. It never even got out of the starting gate. Hence the hard problem of consciousness. It's only a hard problem if you limit yourself to the falsehoods of physicalism, that the physical is all that exists.
So true. So true. I live in Amsterdam, and they're very logical, a lot of the people over there. And I speak my truth to my flatmates, and they're very respectful of it. But then, as they will say, there's no proof in this, Kevin. There's no science in it, it's all very coming from that kind of space. You can sympathize with that, though, can't you?
Well, there is a lot of science to this. What people are telling you is they have not been willing to read any of the science on this. Okay, so that's a valid argument. Willful ignorance is an option that people can choose. I chose that. I never read anything about NDEs before my coma. As a neurosurgeon, Harvard Medical School for 15 years, teaching other neurosurgeons, I knew from my training that NDEs were, a bunch of hallucinations in the dying brain. Who cares? But truth be told, I'd never even remotely gone down the deep pathway of studying the hard problem of consciousness and the deep philosophical mysteries. As a neurosurgeon, I took interest in consciousness kind of with the streetwise approach that we have to take in dealing with people who come in off the streets with aneurysms that rupture and strokes and head trauma, meningitis, what have you, and all those things. It's a very kind of simplistic and pedantic view of consciousness and conscious awareness. And of course, we understand a few things about brain structures and the relationship to consciousness. But one thing that is an absolute myth is the notion that modern neuroscience has anything at all to offer about consciousness and the fundamental mechanism of the creation of consciousness. In fact, they try and dismiss it and say, well, it's all just the chemical reactions of the brain, creates an epiphenomenon or illusion of consciousness. Right. Yeah. And memory, but pay it no mind, it's not real, only the brain is real. That's completely backwards from what is emerging now in the scientific world. And for those out there who want to know more about the science, I would steer you to two very important books. One is called Irreducible Mind, Toward a Psychology for the 21st Century. Came out in 2007. Edgar Kelly is the main editor of that work. It's incredible, 800 pages of dense scientific information, data, and empirical information that all support the reality of non-local consciousness, telepathy, reincarnation, past life memories in children, out-of-body experiences, remote viewing. All these things have some real components to them, and that's what Irreducible Mind is all about. The second book is Beyond Physicalism, from the same group. Beyond Physicalism, Toward Reconciliation of Science and Spirituality, came out in 2015, and those books and others are on my reading list on ebenalexander.com. I encourage people to go visit there and check out some of those books, but there is plenty of science on this. There's a very advanced intellectual discussion going on among scientists around the world on this. A lot of it is still a bit under the radar, and part of that is the mainstream media is so much in the pocket of the bully pulpit of materialist science. If you read the science section of the New York Times or Scientific American, you're not going to be exposed to the deep levels of science that have gone into investigating these broad swathes of human experience and what they offer about the nature of reality. There is tons of science there, but there are plenty of people out there who just consider it easier to say there is no science.
Well, there's a reason why you, with your background, had this experience. It was so that, that someone credible like yourself could come forth and share their truth with the scientific background as well. I mean, it's quite obvious, isn't it? That I'm sure there was many reasons why as well. On top of that, it's not the norm. I mean, it's a real big shake-up to have to go through what you went through.
It was quite a shake-up. And yes, you're right. There was a bit of trepidation back when I was first giving talks about this, as I said, beginning 2.5 years before Proof of Heaven came out. And I presented to physician groups already. So I knew that the message had extreme power, and that I knew where I was headed on this was the right direction. So in my mind, there really was, once I realized that, as I portray in the book Proof of Heaven there, the events that happened at the end of that book, 4 months after my coma, that showed me the reality of the experience. That is where I knew that from that point on, there certainly would never be a burying of it, but I had a certain amount of trepidation about coming out with the story, because I knew that there would be many people around this world who would try and shoot me down in any way they possibly could, because it is a message that hits near and dear and close to home. People hold these kind of worldviews, their metaphysical systems, very close to their hearts. And this challenged that. And yet, the fact of the matter is, I knew that all the facts laid out, not just from my journey, but from the thousands of other journeys reported out there, and all of the evidence concerning those deeply involved in consciousness studies, all of it goes in this one direction.
Yeah.
It is not going towards that point of, brain creates consciousness, we live one life, birth to death, nothing more. None of the evidence points that way. In fact, zero. And that is why this involves a tremendous shift that I would say is going to rival the Copernican revolution. People often talk about major revolutions in human thought. Yeah. That's one that's kind of portrayed as, wow, a biggie. When we went from seeing the Earth as the center of the universe to the sun as the center of the universe. Well, I would say the revolution that I see coming to this world in the next 10 years over this very issue of consciousness and what we're learning about the nature of reality by more deeply assessing the brain-mind connection is going to revolutionize this world far more than the Copernican revolution.
Right, and this is my thing as well. I'd love to bring peace to the planet. I'd love to leave this planet in a better way than once I came. And I will add on to that as well that I think you have to work on yourself to do that. I think to change the world, you have to change yourself. By changing yourself, right, you automatically change the world. But yeah, I still say though that consciousness is, and these subjects are the way forward for world peace. I know that sounds a bit grandeur, but I really think it is.
Oh, it's absolutely correct from my point of view. I agree with you 100%.
Yeah. The space that, thank you for that, the space that you went into when you entered heaven, and well, that's just the word for it. I call it home, although you can personify it however you want, right? That space is so. How much love was there? I mean, how can you explain the love that you experienced in that time period?
You really can't, and of course, that's what so many spiritual journeyers, and that certainly includes near-death experiencers, have been saying for millennia. Is that love when you touch it, and it changes your life forever. And this again is why Karen and I consider it so crucial. And I mentioned this especially in my second book, The Map of Heaven. That whole appendix of that book, entitled The Answers Lie Within Us All, is all about that power of going within. Because going within, with this new model of consciousness, the scientific view is no longer one of brain produces consciousness. The scientific view is now one of filter theory, which is the brain reduces primordial consciousness down to the tiny trickle that gives us this little teeny illusion of a here and now and of our physical existence in this body. But we have access to ascend through the veil to that infinite consciousness. And that is something we can do in deep meditation. And that's why we go around the world encouraging people to go into deep meditative states, because they can come to know all this on their own, from their own experience.
And I think it's so beautiful what you're doing. You've touched so many lives. Many of them you'll never quite know what you did to them. You will do one day when you go back home, but right in this present moment right now, you know you have anyway, just by doing what you do. And that really does come from living your passion. Is that, do you think, a key? Is living our passion? Is the key to fulfillment and happiness, as well as on top of everything we've said. But that is the bigger picture. And if we live our passion, as you are right now, then we are that love that we want to see in the world.
Well, that's very much the case. And, I think for anyone in this world, probably the answer to leading a life that they come to embrace and love is really living that passion. And that is, again, such a huge advantage of this kind of journey, and the fact that any sentient being can cultivate such a journey by going within. And to me, it's been one of the most beautiful gifts is, beginning about 2 years after my coma, realizing how crucial it was to meditate, how crucial it was to go within consciousness. If I was ever going to have any kind of understanding of this journey and what it meant, and kind of the lessons to me of my purpose in life and where this is all going, I had to go within. And that, of course, has been taught to us by seekers and journeyers for thousands of years. Who am I to try and impress on that truth anymore? But yes, it's absolutely the key and the beautiful gift is this going within and discovering that love, because we can all come to know it, feel it, and then manifest it by touching it. And going within is the way to feel that love so completely.
Absolutely, and we're going over time. We've gone over time. This is the last question, I promise you. I've so enjoyed your company on this. It always makes me think, did my soul have nothing better to do on a Saturday night than to come down here, right, and experience this? Yeah. Why does the soul need to experience pain? What is? I mean, there's some questions you can't answer, can you? You have to come up to your own truth. I mean, they're unanswerable, really. But yeah, what is the soul looking for? And it's just, why would I want to put myself through this, to forget the nature of who I really am, then to try to remember it, and to go through so much pain and unhappiness, and everything else on top?
Well, one thing that was very clear from my coma journey, even early on, is that the hardships in life, the difficulties, the challenges, the hurdles, and certainly as a physician, I would include any injury or illness, those are gifts. The hardships are what allow us to see the truth behind all is well, to see the imperfections. And again, this can much more readily be viewed from that higher perspective. That's why going within and detaching from that little ego and all of its little fears and anxieties is so crucial at having us take that much broader view of ourselves and our existence, one that sees us as a beautiful thread in a tapestry, interwoven with the journeys of all the other souls and with whom we are involved. But it really is those apparent dark points and any apparent evil. Those are all the gifts. They are the engines that drive our ascendance, and it's how we deal with those hardships, how we can, in the midst of that, terminal diagnosis or loss of a child or a spouse who commits suicide, the really tough problems of life. And when we're in the midst of them, it's impossible to see any kind of silver lining, and you wonder how in the world can that happen. And it can only take, say, the test of time to come and realize that we may have gained from certain of those challenges. And I would say that we gain from all of them if we can learn the lessons that are so deeply entangled with those challenges that come to us in our lives. And I've come to see that approach has been very helpful in my own life, where I still encounter plenty of challenges and difficulties and people who how come we can't all just get along? But I realize that it's always a beautiful gift, and it's up to me to take that higher view to try and learn the lesson and teach the lesson, because it's always this learning and teaching that we share with our fellow beings. And I came, for example, after my coma, I was my nemesis or my enemy before my coma, as being a near and dear soul mate. It's just that we happen to be trying to teach each other's especially difficult lessons. But really, we're all in this together. And the higher I can take my view of that and realize that oneness and purpose and in sharing of the learning and teaching, the better.
That's so beautiful. And I will say this as well. You mentioned Karen a few times, your partner. Isn't that a beautiful thing, that when you're in alignment and doing what you love to do, living your passion, that's where you met her? That's where you bumped in.
Very much. And of course, it goes to show, people often ask, was God a man or woman? Well, of course, God is pure perfection and oneness, so a perfect blend of all the dualities, including male and female. Yeah. And I must say that my work with Karen has demonstrated very clearly that, to truly get work done in this world, doing it with another soul with whom you are deeply aligned and connected, entangled, is the way that we can reach our greatest fulfillment. And this is all, I'm not just talking about, an intimate couple. I'm talking about much kind of bigger relationships too.
Yeah.
But no question, to have a loving couple relationship like that is deeply spiritual at its profound intersection points is tremendously empowering at reaching one's kind of life journey goals.
Well, that's so true, and I'm so grateful for you to share that, because this isn't a karmic relationship. This isn't a relationship of convenience. It's a soul relationship, which is the third one up, the next one up. It's the most definitely. And also, throughout this interview, we're listening to you as well. I would say that, you would agree that, you create your reality. So be careful what you wish for.
That's absolutely true, because prayers are answered.
Oh,
so
yes.
Be very careful to be sharing the love, just bringing the love into this world. Of course, those are the prayers that are most readily answered, are the ones that involve, the deepest, truest love for self and others. They have the greatest chance of coming to fruition, but it has to do with living that love, becoming the love that we are, as Karen taught me several years ago.
Most definitely. Well, look, we've packed so much in this 51 minutes, well, over 51 minutes now. Your website, just very briefly?
Eben, E-B-E-N, Alexander.com. I would also encourage people to visit sacredacoustics.com if they want to get into brain entrainment, audio very deep meditative state. She has some free downloads there, plus some excellent instructional videos.
Okay, Eben, well, your websites, your books have been coming up on the screen throughout this interview. I know you're doing a third book now as well, so that's going to be fantastic to connect back with yourself, and hopefully I'm hoping to connect with you in person as well, maybe for that book as well. That'll be fantastic.
Yeah, well, I hope to see you when you make it to the U.S.
Definitely. Well, I just want to say this has been a very empowering, uplifting interview, and I, just thank you so much for sharing your truth.
Well, thank you, Kevin. It's been great being with you. A wonderful time together, and namaste.
Well, we've come to an end on today's show. Don't forget that you can listen and watch all our past interviews on the More Show's official YouTube channel. Remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel for new daily shows. You may also find out more on all past and upcoming guests on themoreshow.com, and do like us on Facebook and Twitter for the latest updates. So until next time, be safe.